Welcome. I'm so excited that our interview series, Own Your Voice, is back. This is episode 11, how to reach your goals and enjoy the process. Don't we all want that anyway? Whether you're a beginner, whether you're a professional, whether you're amateur, this episode will be incredibly valuable. I can guarantee that. Because I have as my guest the incredible Renée-Paule Gauthier, who is not only a violinist, she's a high performance coach, she's a writer, she's a blogger. She has the Mind Over Finger podcast and blog, and which now hit her podcast hit 100,000 downloads. So it's been hugely successful, and she's very inspiring. And I know you're going to get so much out of this interview. So stay with us. Definitely say hi in the comments. Say where you are. Chime in with any thoughts, comments. Again, this is for you. And the more you participate, the more you ask questions, the more you're going to get out of it. And this is what we're here for. So without further ado, I'll welcome the incredible Renée-Paule Gauthier. Hi, Renée.
Hi, Stani. So great to see you.
Thank you so much for being here. So I gave a little introduction. You're a violinist. You have very successful podcast, Mind Over Finger, and blog. And you're also a high performance coach. And you just do so many different things. And you've been incredibly successful as a violinist. You play in the Chicago Lyric Symphony and also sub at the Chicago Symphony. You're doing so many things. And could you just give us your kind of little story and from your point of view, your little journey up until now?
Yes, for sure. It's so funny to have that question asked to me when I'm used to ask it to other people on the podcast. Well, the story I share a lot when it comes to why I do mindful practice now is really from the beginning. It started with my mom, who's a pianist. And strangely enough, my dad was a violinist, but my mom was always the person I practiced with. Mm-hmm. And really taught me how to practice. I mean, at the time, she was just making me practice, but that taught me how to practice mindfully, having this guided attention. And I also had a really great teacher who would just encourage curiosity throughout the entire process. Mm-hmm. And actually, he was a guest on the podcast. I think it's episode 25. I'll have to check the number. But his name is Jean-François Rivet. And so he was always really encouraging of us really like living and reading good books, eating good foods, traveling, things like this, so that we would really kind of, the expression I like is like fill our buckets. So we are kind of, happy, well-developed individuals. So it was a great influence in my life. And I did my undergrad in Montreal. I'm French Canadian. So if I say something funny, I will blame the translation. Sometimes it gets stuck somewhere here. And I did my master at Eastman. And after that, I played for a couple of years in the quartet and went to New World Symphony and performed in Canada for several years with the National Arts Centre Orchestra in Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And did 1 year with the Calgary Phil, and then ended up here in Chicago. And and basically in a nutshell, Mind Over Finger came really out of this determination to really help my students practice, because when I started teaching at the college level, I realized that some students would come to me with a very limited knowledge in terms of how to practice, yes, but also not even knowing how to analyze a problem. So basically, the second they would leave the studio, they didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. They didn't know how to listen to themselves. And I would say, experiment with your right hand or something, and they don't even know how to understand the sensation or understand what they're experiencing. And then let alone untangle a problem or practice efficiently. They've been told to practice slowly all their life, but it's the difference between playing slowly and doing actually something that's efficient slowly. So there's a lot of what I call anti-practicing going on when you practice the wrong thing. Yeah. So I developed the deep practice model. It was kind of a combination of putting my experience together and my knowledge. And at the same time, I was pursuing doctoral studies. So I did a lot of research and data and studies and look into a lot of documents and history, and so, and then came the practice model, yeah, and then the podcast. So it's been kind of a fun ride, very interesting.
I love that. I love that you have created a unique career where you really took something you were passionate about. You noticed that there is something unique about your point of view and your experience that other people are missing. There was lack somewhere, and you knew you could help people. And I love you took that idea, you really made it your own. As I talk about, like, once we figure out what's our strength, what makes us unique, once you take that and really develop it and own it, really incredible things happen. And you're just the proof of what you've built just with that idea that you really knew you could help people with your particular point of view on music, on practicing, on performance. And so you created, as you said, you started the blog and the podcast, and you've become a high performance coach, and you've helped so many people on the way. And so you talked about the deep practice model, which is your now it's your trademark. That's how I thought about you. I always think, whenever I think of mindful practice, I think Renée-Paule.
Oh, that's great. I like that.
A few things. First, I love what you said about your teacher, the one who just talked about how important it is to fill yourself with joy. And actually, I was talking about this a couple of days ago. I went online talking about just how important it is that we're joyful, that we try to find joy in little things and in everything, because that builds up and makes us happier, and we approach what we have to do with much more joy. So I just love that. I'm so
even back in March when everything shut down, and I just celebrated my 6 months anniversary at home a few days ago, and I remember when we were supposed to do the ring cycle here at Lyric, and it got canceled, and it was just so devastating. And right away my reaction was to, first of all, like, I felt this need to reach out to, my people. And I was wondering, like, oh, what is there left? And I realized, well, the music is left. So I had the Joyful Practice Challenge, where it was just every day for 2 weeks. I had little prompts, and I would, share it with my tribe. And we did this little Joyful Practice Challenge. And I know that for me, when all of this happened, it would have been so easy to just kind of shut down and just get so depressed, but that really kept me going into kind of really reconnecting to the things that I love and why I play music. And so I agree with you. Joy is such an important component of practicing.
Yes, and in everything, and I love that. And as you mentioned, it's never easy. It's always hard work, as we naturally default to being, sad, regretting, complaining. That's how we're built. But really, it's hard work to really change your mindset, to really look at the positive side, or look for the joy, for opportunity to be joyful, because it just escalates and makes everything we do so much more, not only joyful, better, and like we enjoy the process, which is something we're talking about today.
Yes.
And could you tell us and to all the viewers a little bit more about, and I know this is your trademark, so feel free to say as little as much as you'd like to share about the deep practice model for those of you who are not familiar.
Yes, it really is a combination of practice system. So it's it kind of, in my head, it's in a table, a quadrant, and on the right side here, is, what I call the intentional practice system. And that uses a lot of the elements that we hear about for deliberate practice, all of the principles that people such as Anders Ericsson's researched. So it's not like there's, things that people have never heard about, but it's just the way I organize it and the way I use it is a very systematized, specific way. And it's simple. Break things into chunk. I mean, within the whole context, there's a lot of information, but in a nutshell, use chunks, understand what you're looking at, what you're practicing at an intellectual level, see what is there to be seen, what are the patterns, etc. And then use drills to learn it efficiently. And then there's so many techniques. When you say slow practice is so many different things. Or tempo drills, like how many little drills can you have to learn things at tempo. Performance practice, so really how to practice performing. A big big part of the deep practice model is really how to memorize. That's really important. It really helps us practicing it deep and learning it deeply. So that's one part of it, is all of this system and these methods to practice really deliberately. And with that comes a set of mindsets. And when I was really trying to think about that, at first I thought, you need this, you need this, you need this. But I was trying to develop something that would be palatable for someone. So if you've never really practiced mindfully, I can't come to you with 10 different mindsets. It's overwhelming. So I try to distill it with the 4 that were at the basic of everything, and I feel were really making a huge difference in my life, which are what I call bare awareness, how you pay attention, beginner's mind, which is remaining curious, investigating, but also monitoring the fundamentals. So I have a way that I see beginner's mind, problem-solving mindset. So to really have this approach of, it's almost like the scientific method of investigating problems. And then it's the one I'm saying at the end, but it's not the least important, is self-compassion. And I always want to clarify, it's never lowering your standards, because if you want a job in an orchestra, you need to play a certain way to win. So it's never about accepting less than what you can do really well and showing the best of yourself and practicing as well as you can. But it's to develop a language that is empowering and respectful of yourself, and learning to speak to yourself in the way that is supportive. Well, the one I like the most is really empowering, because the way you talk to yourself can really empower you or disempower you. So it's developing this kind of language. I also believe that if you have self-compassion for yourself, you start to behave in the way that shows a lot of self-compassion with your colleagues and the whole musical world at large. And I feel like that's definitely something that we could use, when things go back to normal.
Absolutely. That's so wonderful. I love hearing about this, and the idea of self-compassion. We never talk about this in school or in gigs and career, whenever that's so underrated, and it's so important.
And then if you Google it, find all of the studies. I have piles right there. I can see it. Piles of studies that talks about how self-compassion and the way you talk to yourself in the practice room. There's a bunch of course, the world of sports has a lot more money to throw in research than we do. So I end up reading a lot of sports-related studies. It is proven that if you are able to speak to yourself in the way that is supportive, you're more effective in training. So I think if it works for NBA players, it's going to work for us too.
Absolutely, yeah. And you wish, everything you're talking about is so Zen. All the idea of mindfulness, being present, being calm, being kind, observing. I love all these ideas that I feel like I definitely didn't have them when I was in college. I had kind of the opposite. We're just so busy, just practicing, and there's a level of competition when you're in school that there's an edge, and we can never get into that mindset. I wish more institutions could adopt it on a bigger level. Can you imagine what would happen to the music world if that was the standard? What are you talking about?
And I was just reading about all of these sports teams that are hiring mindset coach now. I mean, one of the most famous one is George Mumford, and he was hired by Phil Jackson back in the 90s, to coach various teams, namely the Chicago, oh my gosh. I was going to say Chicago Bears. That's not it. Basketball. Chicago Bulls. And worked with, I'm Canadian. I only care about hockey. So, but, working with Michael Jordan and the entire team onto how to play better. And I know he did some work with the Lakers as well. So, I mean, I think the world of sports is really now aware of the advantage you have when you have this approach So there's definitely something to be learned for us there. I think it's starting.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're so used to being self-critical, and we think we're good. Oh, I'm helping myself. I'm being tough on myself.
Yeah.
Being super critical. You know, we try, and I've done this so many times. I try to have my teacher's voice in my head, but as great as my teacher might be, that doesn't always serve me well.
Yeah.
And it tends to have like negative effects, and it's really spirals the more we keep.
It's one thing I was talking with a client the other day, because I live that, right? I'm still not applying everything that I say 100% all the time. I revert to old habits, and I'm really highly self-critical. But I was talking to her about how we go so quickly from, I miss this shift, and now we're good at it. So for me, the spiral goes down really quickly to, I miss this shift. If I go slowly, miss the shift, don't know how to shift, no technique, terrible, probably the worst human being ever. So now it goes like, I missed the shift, and oh, you're terrible, you're just awful. So if I have a bad practice session, I usually, I can end up in the bad mood if I don't catch myself. Now I'm really good at catching myself. But what happens too is that when you start to attack yourself that way, there's also a part of you that's trying to protect you. So at the subconscious level, you're having this internal battle where one part of yourself is attacking you, and the other part is trying to protect you. And how can you figure out anything when you're in this internal battle? How can you effectively assess an issue or work on a shift or work on anything in the way that's productive and open-minded and conducive to great results when you're just stuck in this cloud of self-judgment? So we lose all objectivity, and it's just not as productive. So when we start to see it this way, because we want to be tough and like, I'm going to work hard and I'm going to learn this piece and prepare. And at the same time, I mean, we have a hard time letting go of this idea of the hardworking musician. But when we understand that logically, it's way better to use self-compassion. Again, never saying, oh, it's out of tune, it's okay. But saying like, it's out of tune. I do not have to hate myself about it. I can figure out how to fix it.
That's a great point. And yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, like, for people watching, what would be some, like, replacements for our usual scripts? What would be a good replace that people can maybe just try this week in their practice?
Yes. First of all, just paying attention and noticing when that's happening already is probably the most powerful thing, because the second you start seeing that you're doing it, you become what I call the observer of yourself. And when you start observing yourself, you are less directly involved in the way. It's kind of a complex process. And then go to observing the language that you're using and take it from a personal attack. Sorry, now I'm thinking in French, you can tell, because my grammar is all wrong. So to take it from I am to I do, to no longer have an identity. You're not someone who plays out of tune. You maybe you did sorry. Why am I thinking in French? Oh, how always happens. It's because I'm thinking really hard about practicing. That's really what it is. But to go from you're awful to this was out of tune. So not so much as I play out of tune, but this was out of tune. And really start to take it away from I never do anything right to how can I figure this out? So take it away from yourself, really separate it from your identity and assess it objectively the way you would guide a beloved student or your best friend, the way you would talk to that person, because it's very difficult to be this unkind to other people. So we need to start applying it to ourselves a little bit more.
I love that. So there seems like there are two major steps. First, being aware. Try to, maybe from today, if that's something you think you might have an issue, start noticing. For anyone watching, if you start noticing the scenario, what are the thoughts you tell yourself? What are the things you tell yourself when you practice? Observing, and then distancing yourself from what you're doing to who you are. You are not the bad intonation. You're not the, you know, the sloppy arpeggio or something. That happened in that moment, but kind of distancing and seeing it, being an observer of what's happening.
Exactly. Yes.
That's beautiful. And that way, and I feel like another thing that happens once we distance ourselves from what's happening, we're not emotionally involved, because it's not about who we are.
Yes.
Just emotions, probably the emotional attachment to what we do drops in a good way, I think.
Yes.
Again, it's not, our ego is not at stake. It's a thing that we can change at any time, sounds like.
Yes, absolutely.
That's so great. I actually, honestly, I loved when I first found out about the deep practice model. I really loved it because I realized after I left school, I started teaching myself. Like, I had no guidance at that point. I still needed lessons, but for a couple of years, I hadn't had lessons. And I realized I started becoming more curious, and just I knew I wanted to get still better. I didn't think I was at like a final level ever, and I never do, which I'm thankful for. But so I try to find, and I became more curious. So when you talk about the importance of curiosity, it really, really resonated with how I've been approaching everything. Just like as a bystander, I've become so much more interested of the nuances that I can create, and in a way, I've become more creative.
Yes.
And the process has been so much more exciting now because there's no pressure.
Yes, and like the best way for me to make practicing fun is to become exactly what you said, to become really creative about it. Because this curiosity, that's really the essence of beginner's mind, is a beginner sees things with such awe, you know, it's like they want to absorb everything, and they're not closed-minded. I mean, a good example I can give, which is easily understandable for violinists or any string player, if you see a set of 16th notes, tell me real quick, what are you going to start, what bow are you going to do on the downbeat? Down bow. Like, that's what we do. That's what we're trained to do. And you know what? In 99% of the cases, it's probably the right thing to do. But what if you tried it a bow? And what would that do? And then sometimes you practice your 16th notes with the same rhythms all the time, or you put accents on different beats, or like, we've all done this. Everybody does this. Are they good practicing methods? Absolutely. They're great. Yes. But at times we start to do it mechanically because we're expert at it. So what if you start, something I was suggesting to a client this weekend was, pick the rhythm from another piece and then put it to that passage. And the exercise is so confusing. And we were laughing because she was a mess. Like, she was just like, couldn't figure it out. And it was so funny. And then within 40 seconds, she figured it out, and it was easier and easier. But we were having so much fun doing that. And then she started seeing, like, wow, there's so much stuff I can do. I can really create new ways of practicing. And I was like, hey, you can come up with practice drills that you've never thought before. You don't have to stick to the same thing that you've done before. So how creative can you get with your practice? Try something else. Try something new. I mean, I remember my teacher at some point was having me practice where you play and you have to, I don't think I would do that now. I don't trust myself. But they had these big staircases at the University of Montreal, and we would like walk, and I would have to play and go up 2, up 1, up 2, up 1. Or it was like up 2, up 1, up 1, up 2, up 2, like something like this. And it was like 9 floors, so we had, many chances. And when he said this, I was like, that's silly, that's crazy. And then you do it, and then you realize, oh wow, this is very interesting. And then after you try it without the added difficulty, and it feels very different all of a sudden. So, sky is the limit in terms of how creative you can get with your practice.
That's great. I know for myself, as I said, I've been more experimental with my practicing and how I practice things. And something that's helped me a lot is also trying to see how can I make things more difficult than they already are. Like, I was like, well, if this was like on an up bow, if this was a downbeat, that would be so much harder. And I practiced it that way again, kind of figuring out how to like challenge how something that's difficult, maybe what if I try to practice it
Yes,
in a more
absolutely.
it becomes easy, is kind of what you said too. But that's so wonderful. And how about, I was wondering, you mentioned the importance of memorizing your music. Can you tell us more why that is, and in your experience with students and yourself, why that is? I'm curious.
Because when we're reading music, there's a whole filtering process that's happening. So first the eye sees it, the brain through a whole system, mechanism, analyzes it, and then transmits the information to the fingers. And then to memorize a passage, oftentimes, if it's somewhat complex, you need to start really thinking about it and understanding a few things, and some neural pathways are created. And if you're someone who knows about myelination, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you don't know what myelination is, that's really great thing to know and understand about our brain. Don Green, it's Green with an E at the end, which is the sport or music psychologist that a lot of us.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. I worked with him at New World, and it changed how I prepare for performances forever. But he's got a great video out there that explains that process. So if you just Google Don Green with an E, myelination, there's a short video. And basically what myelination does is that every time you do something, there's a little sheath of a substance called myelin that covers the neural pathway that you just created. I mean, I'm kind of butchering the explanation here, but you watch his video. And the more you do that, the more coding is on that neural pathways, and it goes fast. Then when you're trying to access that information, it becomes like a very efficient fiber optic connection. It goes super quickly. No, it's not no longer like an internet dial. Yeah, younger people here will not know what I'm talking about. So when you memorize, you need to create these pathways. So you are bypassing the whole filtering process of going from the eye to the thinking, to the processing, to the execution. So when you can bypass all of this and you go from thinking it and executing it, then you can really start to think about first of all, like your technique. You can really go from, I hear this sound, to executing the sound exactly the way you hear it, because you're freeing a lot of bandwidth in your brain so that you can go directly to the execution. So, if you're playing a different gig every week, can you memorize the whole thing? No. But maybe there's a measure in the symphony that's causing you a lot of problems, and maybe you can memorize that measure. And when you get there, it's not as scary. Yeah, so whenever there's a rehearsal next.
That's a great point. That's wonderful. I wonder, you have such a unique and just incredibly valuable approach to practicing performance. Have you met with any resistance to your ideas on the way, whether early or now, from students, other teachers? I'm just curious, because I only see how it can be like incredibly enriching.
Yes.
To everyone. But I just wonder on your path.
That's a great question. It's funny. No resistance in terms of, I think that's ridiculous. No one's ever said that. Everybody's always like, oh yeah, that's great. But resistance in the sense that we are so creatures of habits. Like, we are creatures of habit. People practice a certain way. And at times, practicing with the deep practice model, where you have to like stop and map things and understand what's happening and memorize, it feels like it takes longer. But it doesn't. In the long run, you're saving time. But I think that there's only resistance in terms of people finding safety and comfort in the way they've always practiced.
Absolutely. And
just maybe not trying it enough, and trusting that, it's like if you're a Karate Kid fan and and he doesn't understand, Daniel doesn't understand why he's painting a wall and things like this. And sorry, I'm like I guess we were big in Cobra Kai in the last few weeks, so I have Karate Kid on my mind. Great show, by the way. So sometimes there's a process that makes complete sense, but we're so quick. We just want to do this, So that's the only resistance I meet, is when people they're like, that's it. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. Great. And what would you say? Well, I was curious to touch on. We talked about practicing. How does that apply in performance? What are some guidelines that the deep practice model? I mean, it's practice, but how does that translate into a performance?
Well, first of all, you feel more prepared. Yes. And with that, I also have, so I have a group training program right now, and then we cover all of that, the performance preparation, how to do a reverse engineering, all sorts of practicing techniques, how to really start practicing in the performance mindset a lot more in the practice room. I think oftentimes we practice a certain way, and then we feel like we go on stage and we perform. And what I advocate is, no, just bring the stage in the practice room and perform a lot more in the practice room, so that when you step on stage, the two environments are much more blended, excuse me, in your mind. And of course, also in the coaching, we talk a lot about visualization and mental practice and performance anxiety management, and there's all sorts of technique. And of course, I use some of the Don Green technique, the centering and all of that. So for performance, I mean, the deep practice model helps you learn the music better, so it's anchored more. And then with that, you bring all of the other stuff that goes around preparing for a performance.
I love that idea of really seeing kind of the end result. If there's a particular performance you're preparing for, and just really kind of visualizing it and seeing that in everyday practice really helps, even if it's just nerve-wise, like, you think differently, whether I'm just like, okay, another day in the practice room is different than how am I going to feel there, what it's going to look like.
Yes.
Your adrenaline up more regularly while you play as well.
Yes.
Feeling. That's Don Green.
Yes. Like at New World, they would do us, like they would make us do, I don't know why, stairs.
Yes, he loves stairs.
It's just like running to get your heart rate elevated. That I think is good. Or the only two that I was not a big fan of is because I had tendonitis my freshman year because I was never warming up properly. So anything that involves doing a run through when you're not warmed up, I'm not an advocate of, because I feel like that can really cause injury. Maybe if you do it once, that's okay. But I think that if that's something that you start doing a lot, of just like walk in the practice room and run through your concerto, for me, that's not something I'd advocate. And the other thing is, some people are like, oh, just put your hands under cold water and then play. That's another thing that I would say. You could do it once to try, but the danger for injury is so great that it's not something I recommend. But all of the other stuff, like getting your heart rate elevated is really, I mean, do we have times in life where we have to perform unwarmed up? That happens. You're stuck in traffic, or you're backstage and they say it's your turn 15 minutes before you imagine that. Sure, yes. So, okay, you can try to play without a warm up, but don't make that a habit in the long term.
Absolutely. Renee, you mentioned you have a program coming up, and which kind of uses all these ideas and more, and brings everything to another level, really. And can you tell us more? I know that applies to, the program is for any instruments, correct? Can you you can tell us more?
Yeah, for sure. So the program is called the Music Mastery Experience. And when I was trying to think of a name for it, you're thinking Music Mastery Academy, or none of these terms resonated with me, because what it is an experience. It's we get together twice a week. It's face-to-face with a group. There's a lot of support. There's a framework. There's, everyone going through this together. And like you say, it's for all instrumentalists. I have organ players in the program, oboe players, violin, bass, name it. It's all possible. And we really cover everything. It's basically everything I know thrown into a program. And for 3 months, we come together twice a week, and we set up goals, we set up performances, accountability, and then there's trainings where I teach all of the principles and the methods and concepts. And I have pretty long handouts But one of my favorite part is the group coaching, where we come together and really everyone gets to talk about all of the things. We unpack it all and troubleshoot it, and really try to really lead to a lot of insight. And it's just been great. We finished the first round. The first cohort ended about 3 weeks ago, and it was just so great to see all of the insight that they gained, but all the wins as well. There were like some concrete, career opening opportunities, and just the growth and all of the amazing things that they accomplished that they didn't think were possible before. So yeah, it's been great.
Sounds like such a great program. And I love the idea of the community where everyone can really and it sounds like it's so personalized because anyone can bring whatever that's on their mind to the community. You're there to help as the mentor, and the rest of the community too. That's incredible. And it's 5 week, which kind of really keeps everyone engaged. Not everyone can bring their issues and whatever they're struggling with.
Exactly. Yeah. And I keep it small so that everyone feels like it's intimate, and it's so that everyone also can get a lot of personalized attention. So it's wonderful.
So great. And that starts on the 21st, just in a few days.
Yeah. Starts Monday.
And would you say, is this for professional musicians or what level would this be ideal for? What kind of musician would be the best fit?
In the last cohort, I say college up. In the last cohort, we had consummate professionals playing at the highest level. We had entering freshmen going into performance degrees, super enthusiastic amateurs. We had a lot of teachers as well. Great. Because that's the other thing too, is once you have these methods and this approach and the system,